let me be clear on a few points. I am not a philosopher. I'm not going to speak about doctrines. I am not going to speak about concepts, views, perceptions of human rights. I am going to speak about the experiences from the point of view of victims and human rights defenders in relation to the global human rights challenges previously identified by the past speaker. So, third point, this will only be limited to Philippine experience. So, I'll present a few illustrative examples of the global human rights challenges in the Philippines and to what extent the Philippine institutions and the international institutions address these challenges. So let me first give you a background of the Philippines. Economically, the Philippines is an archipelagic country. It is composed of 7,100 islands, and 68 million Filipinos occupy 300,000 square meters of its lands. However, despite the rich mineral and natural resources, majority of the Filipinos continue to wallow in poverty because of the neoliberal policies of basic services privatization, trade liberalization, oil deregulation, private-public sector partnership, and partnerships. So this result in poor social services, loss of livelihood, lack of employment opportunities coupled with environmental degradation, and poor capacity to adapt to calamities and climate change. As to the violation of civil and political rights, as of March 2016, 3 months before the past president ended his term, there were 318 victims of extrajudicial killings. 152 are from Mindanao, that's the southernmost part of the Philippines, and 64 are from the Bicol region, that's where I come from. As to the human rights defenders, they are facing trumped up and fabricated charges against because they oppose the present economic and human rights situation, resulting in high number of political prisoners. Now, the question is, with the global human rights challenges and with the situation in the Philippines, to what extent are these being addressed by the national and international institutions? So let me give you some examples. Previously, globalization and development was identified as a human rights challenge. In the Philippines, we have large-scale foreign destructive mining. We have a Philippine mining law which allows operation of corporations owned 100% owned by foreigners. This law gives tax holidays to these corporations. They do not give royalty shares to indigenous peoples. They have timber rights, they can cut trees. They have water rights, they can divert the flow of water. And they have expropriation rights, they can evict even indigenous peoples from their ancestral lands. This law has been in existence for 20 years. This law has been engaged in the plunder of our natural resources, pollution, and destruction of our communities. Now, we assailed the constitutionality of this mining law. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court ruled that it is not unconstitutional. The Supreme Court ruled that it is not unconstitutional because, according to our courts, it is merely a service contract and it does not divest the Filipinos of the right over their land. In 2011, the Supreme Court promulgated the rules of procedure for environmental cases, and this is a fresh welcome. However, in the case of Rapu-Rapu mining, we filed a case before the courts, but we lost. We used the rules of procedure for environmental cases. We asked the court to order the mining corporation to rehabilitate. But according to them, it is moot and academic because they already submitted their mine rehabilitation and decommissioning plan. For the information of everybody, I live near Rapu-Rapu mining before I left my previous job. That's another island away from us. We are being separated by a body of water. Rapu-Rapu is an island municipality, and Aquinas University, the Dominicans, are engaged in the campaign against mining in Rapu-Rapu. In 2005, there were cyanide spills which affected the communities. But our government only suspended the operation, and a few months they were allowed to resume. We filed a writ of continuing mandamus because when it ended its operation in August 2013, they do not have a final mine decommissioning and rehabilitation plan. But they submitted after they ended the operation, and it turned out that they only left more or less 400 million pesos in the bank or in trust for rehabilitation. As of now, 1/3 has been used already for consultancy services only. No improvement in the communities and in the lives. Last year, I was there, and the situation is devastating. That's how their rivers look like. Tampakan mining is a different story. It is a house to, it is the richest in Southeast Asia in terms of copper and gold. And it sits atop the mountain of Cotabato. It is a home to Balaan communities, a group of indigenous people. Under the law, before mining corporations can operate in an area which is a home, which is an ancestral land, they must secure first the free, prior, and informed consent. However, the mining corporations, including the government institution of the Philippines, manipulated in manifold ways to secure the FPIC through the divide and rule tactics. They caused division among the tribal groups, secure the consent of one tribal group in their favor, while the other opposes. And so, they have the consent, they can operate. However, at present, the permit to operate in Tampakan has been revoked by our new Environment Secretary, and that is a good news for us. Just to mention, there are also victims of extrajudicial killings in Tampakan because indigenous peoples just want to defend their ancestral lands. There are also human rights defenders, one of which is a priest, Father Faustino Paps Tentorio, and he was killed. He devoted 30 years of his life to the indigenous peoples in Mindanao and fought with them against mining. As to now, no case has yet been filed despite investigations. Another case of mining is Tidipio. This is in the northern part of the Philippines, in Nueva Vizcaya. This is also a home to indigenous groups. It is Oceana Gold which operate in this area, and people opposed the entry of mining operations, and through concerted people's actions, with help and support of church groups, environmental organizations, and other cost-oriented groups, they were able to drive away the mining corporation, which result in the closure of the mine. But we are worried about the pending engagement of the Philippines in Trans-Pacific Partnerships, or TPPs, because it allows transnational corporations to file suits against poor states under the ISDS, or the Investor State Dispute Settlement. I believe this has happened in El Salvador, when the government closed the mine, and they filed a suit against El Salvador. They won the case, and El Salvador was ordered to pay damages. So there is still hope, because with the appointment of a new environment secretary, which is an anti-mining czar, several mines have been closed in the past 3 months. Two months. And the People's Mining Bill, which is supposed to serve the Filipinos, has been refiled in the present Congress. So let's go to another global challenge. So in the Philippines, we have been in dispute with China over this Baho Masinloc. This is the South China Sea, but we also call it the West Philippine Sea. You see Baho de Masinloc, the disputed area, is very rich in natural gas. So that's what causes the dispute. So a case, the matter was brought to the International Tribunal, and a decision has been issued. The decision says that that is a part of international waters and does not form part of any of the waters of any of the two countries. So at present, China still has its establishments in the area, but the Philippines, despite the previous pronouncements of our present president that he will go to that place and put the Philippine flag. So yeah, he said it during his campaign. He is open to bilateral agreements with China, and that is also good for us. Now, as to human rights violations, there have been several violations of human rights in the past 2 administrations, during the time of Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo and the time of President Benigno Aquino. During the time of President Duterte, extrajudicial killings, the cause of killings is different. It is because of the war against drugs of our present president. But the previous 2 presidents, the killings at the time are more because of one's political beliefs. But let me show you some examples of those cases which were addressed and those which are not addressed by the institutions. First, there is torture of Rolly Panessa. He is a security guard. He was mistaken for a rebel. He was tortured and brought to the courts, but he was released by the courts. We filed counter charges, and now the case is ongoing. But we all know that Torture is non-derogable right. Even during times of war, this right should not be violated, the right against torture. During the spate of extrajudicial killings in around 2007, the Supreme Court issued the rules of procedure for writ of amparo that is a protection, and the writ of habeas data, where you can ask a group, you can go to court and ask the court to order this group to produce all the data that you have because it is a threat or a violation of my right. So we tried filing cases of writs of amparo and habeas data. I will show it to you later. Second is the investigation by the Melo Commission, which is in favor of the victims, but the recommendations were not honored. And another good thing is the visit of the UN Special Rapporteur, Philip Alston, which gave very good recommendations, but they were put on naught because they were ignored by the Philippine government. Why was I able to say that it was ignored? Because killings continued. So these are some of the cases. Cadapan and Empeño, these are two students of the University of the Philippines. They were abducted and now they remain missing. On the right is Raymond Manalo. He and his brother were abducted, and in one of the places where they were brought, they were tortured also. They saw Karen and Sherlyn, the two ladies, being subjected to all kinds of abuses, physical, psychological, and sexual by the military. Raymond Manalo and Reynaldo Manalo were able to escape. They filed a writ of amparo, and Raymond Manalo is now a witness to the case against General Jovito Palparan. This young boy, he was a student of Aquinas University of Legazpi when he was killed. He is an anti-mining advocate, and he was killed on his way to school from his hometown a day after his 21st birthday. Another case is the abduction, torture, and surface of Melissa Rojas. Rojas is from the USA. She went to the Philippines with Bayan, Bagong Alyansang Makabayan. He is a member of Bayan USA, and she was abducted, but she was surfaced. She was tortured. She filed a case for writ of amparo, but the same was denied. Now, on the right side is Edith Burgos. Her unrelenting search for her son, Jonas Burgos, continues. Jonas Burgos is a farmer, is an agriculturist. He helps farmers in Central Luzon. And one day, he was abducted. Up to now, he is missing. The mother filed a case for writ of amparo, but it was granted. But the writ of habeas corpus was not granted. Now, in the several cases that I have handled, extrajudicial killings, torture, we found it difficult to file a case because the police officers will not conduct an investigation. And if they will conduct an investigation, it is merely a table investigation. They merely rely on the testimonies of the witnesses. They do not do forensics. They do not get blind samples. And that is how it looks like in the Philippines. This is Pinoy crime scene investigation. This is the correct crime scene investigation. As a result, evidence are tampered. We don't have evidence. Question is, for us lawyers, how can we file cases before the courts when we do not have evidence? How can we get justice for the victims when we do not have something in our hands to bring to the courts. The third global challenge identified a while ago is the right to peace and peace process. And our new president is welcome to go back, he has had this pronouncement of going back to the negotiation table with the communist groups and with the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. The good news is, last August 22, they already resumed the peace talks with the aim of affirming the previous agreements, which were not honored by the past two presidents, and with the ultimate goal of addressing the roots of the armed conflict. Yesterday, peace negotiations between the MILF and the government of the Philippines also started in Malaysia. The first talks was facilitated by the Royal Norwegian government. The second was facilitated by the government of Malaysia. Now, let's go to Mindanao, where we have this counter-insurgency and counter-terrorist programs. For the information of everybody, just last night, at least 10 were killed and several others were wounded in a bombing in a city night market in Davao. That's where our president come from. That's the hometown of our president. So, some of the cases is the Lianga massacre. Emerito Samarca is the director of an alternative lumad school for indigenous people because the DepEd, our government, do not provide schools to our indigenous children. So they established their own school. So Samarca is the executive director. And one day, last year, September 1, last year, Samarca and two other tribal leaders were killed by the paramilitary groups, Magahat Bagani. Despite the identification of the perpetrators, no warrant of arrest was issued by the courts. As a result of the harassments by these paramilitary groups, the Lumads, or the indigenous groups, were left with no option but to leave their homes. What did our government do? Last year, they tried, a member of the House of Representatives tried to convince them to go back to their lands. But according to them, we will only go back if the military and the paramilitary groups will leave our lands and leave us in peace. We need our right to self-determination back. We need our ancestral lands back. With the assurance from the present Philippine President, 2 days ago, they went back to their homes to reclaim the Lumad lands. So it is also important that the executive has this political will of really addressing the problems and the root causes of the problems and the human rights violations in the Philippines.
You still have 5 minutes.
Yes, I am almost. So we have this, the UN visited the place, so I will do it. So the UN Special Rapporteur took note of the situations, and according to them, they will file reports. They will have it. They will submit recommendations to the Human Rights Commission. Now, poverty is a different issue. We have been badly hit by Yolanda, the typhoon Yolanda, but up to now, most of the families still do not have homes. And another case in point is the Kidapawan massacre, wherein farmers who are victims of El Nino disaster were left with no option but to go to the town center to ask for rice. But instead of giving them rice, they were given bullets, and they were charged for direct assault, including this old lady there. There are also killings in the midst of an armed encounter or in the guise of armed encounter. The Mancera family, the Garduque family, and the Estrellado case are all cases of killings under the guise of an armed encounter just because their houses stood in the line of fire between the rebels and the military. So the question is, are our institutions able to address? We have many laws. We have many laws protecting human rights, but we also have laws that favor the interest of the few elites. And these laws are the most utilized ones. So to conclude, I will not read anymore. Apparently, state institutions merely provide remedies in cases of human rights violations without addressing the problems of social inequalities and the root causes, and those are the global challenges mentioned a while ago. As long as the root causes are there, I believe the situation will persist. Because apparently, the Philippines can only provide band-aid remedies. Our country, our state, cannot resist the financial and economic powers. As to the United Nations, it has been proven that in several instances of cases of impunity in the Philippines, we feel their presence, and we do not take lightly. We give high regard to the role of the United Nations. But the question is, how do we implement the recommendations of the United Nations? So I guess I'll just end it. The challenge for all of us who are here actually is I'm sorry. I'm just looking for my, yes. Okay. We are here because we believe in the respect for rights. We believe because we are promoters of justice and peace. But there is a big task ahead of us. Of course, we did not put into our hands the functions or the responsibilities of the institutions. But the reason why we are here is because we unite in one common goal. We believe in the integrity of life. We believe in the integrity of God's creation. The right to life and other human rights must be respected at all times, being inherent to the human existence the moment that a human person is born. Under these situations, I believe it is our moral responsibility to take actions, to take the challenge together and in solidarity with the peoples of the world, regardless of our political or religious beliefs, for the respect of human rights, promotion of justice, to uphold democracy, and for the attainment of just and lasting peace. Thank you.